Hello, my name is Ivan Richmond, and I have been thinking a lot about what it means to be a good person. And I think it's hard these days, I think it's really gotten hard because we have these different political factions that have these very ideological ideas about what it means to be a good person. We have these battles about, whether or not there even is a health crisis, what our obligations are, if any, in the health crisis, whether we have an obligation to mask to protect other people, or whether we're free and people shouldn't keep down our freedom. We have these issues about whether or not we have free speech and how much our free speech extends. Do we have the right to offend other people? If people are offended by us, do they have a right to destroy our livelihood, destroy our careers? Do we have, some sort of obligation regarding, our fellow human beings, even people who aren't members of our religion, and people who aren't sort of part of our circle, social circle. I think that it's hard because even before then, there was a lot of stuff going on. You had, these religious extremists from various different religions who seemed to feel that they have some sort of right to talk down to the rest of us. They had some sort of right to emotionally abuse us in some cases. In some cases, they had a right to just really, treat us, the rest of us, like we're just, bad people who need to be, thumped over the head with a holy book and sort of forced to be good by their lights, not by ours. And in extreme cases, we've seen terrorism, both domestic and foreign, that seem to be, to some level, religiously motivated. And I think that it even goes back further than that. I mean, in fact, I've been thinking about this, and the more I think about this, I think that for over a century and a half now, we have been in something that I call the moral crisis here in the West. The moral crisis is exactly this feeling of not knowing really what it means to be good. It seems like no matter where we turn, there's always some answer that just doesn't quite link up the right way. There's a problem with every answer that everybody out there seems to have. And the more I think about it, the more I think that nobody really knows the answer. We're on our own. It really is down to each one of us. And I think we all have intuitions about what it means to be good. I certainly do. And I hope you do too. And we try to follow them. My friends tell me that I'm typically a good person by their reckoning. They also are perfectly willing to tell me that I mess up a lot. And they do too. But, the more I think about it, I mean, if we ask, for example, God, okay, it's great if there's a God, and that God, in fact, has given us some sort of holy book or holy teaching that tells us how to be good. That sounds wonderful to me. The only questions are, number one, how do we know there's a God, right? Number two, if there's a God, which holy book is the right one? Or are any of them right? I mean, the more we look at holy books, the more we think humans made holy books, not God. Despite all the mythology that says that there was some, burning bush or something like that, that God talked to, that God spoke to people. Well, they all say that, and we can't really confirm these things. And so the more we look at it, the more we kind of go, well, how do we know? And if you have faith, great. If you're a faithful person, wonderful. But But faith isn't knowledge. You can't really force that on anybody else. I mean, how do you know what faith to have? You have to believe something before you can have faith, don't you? So the more I think about it, the more I feel like religion doesn't really answer the question. Religion helps people who are in those religions, but it doesn't bring us together because there are so many different religions. And then about 5 years ago, I started looking into philosophy, specifically the philosophy of ethics. So I became very interested in this because I was thinking so much about what does it mean to be good. And I think part of it is that, I live in this very liberal area in the San Francisco Bay Area. And to be honest, the liberal answer is very often think for yourself. Well, that's great, but what? What exactly are we supposed to think for ourselves? I agree. I think we should all think for ourselves. But what exact conclusions do we come to? So I started looking into what philosophers have said. And what I started to realize is that that's kind of a dead end too. Or to put it another way, it's a bunch of twisted passages all alike, to quote the famous 1970s computer game Zork. Or I think that may come from Adventure. Okay, I'm geeking out. You get the idea. The thing is, if you look at Immanuel Kant from the 18th century, Kant said, basically, how would it be if we all did that? That's the big question. And he wanted to have these things called maxims, which are these, absolutes, where, if it's wrong to lie, it's always wrong to lie. If it's wrong to steal, it's always wrong to steal. Well, there's a bunch of problems with that. It sounds great from a distance, but it's problems with that. And the more I look at different ethical, philosophical ideas, just as it is with religion, the closer you get in and look at the details, the more you realize that it doesn't really solve all my problems. So then I looked at John Stuart Mill. Now, John Stuart Mill had a philosophy about maximizing the happiness for everyone. Now, in order to do that, though, he had to talk about something that he called subtle happiness. Okay, so subtle happiness is basically about the concept of, like, an example of what's not subtle happiness is like heroin. Like, obviously it's not ethical to support somebody's heroin habit, right? Heroin feels great and it makes you happy when you take it, but what he's tried to distinguish between is that kind of happiness, which is he called gross happiness, and happiness that's like, having enough food on the table, having a roof over your head, having friends, having love, being loved, those kind of more intangible sorts of things that he thought life is really about. But the problem gets down to, well, how do we decide what's subtle happiness? How do we parse this out? And anyway, how do we come up with some sort of calculation to find out where our resources should go? I mean, do we try to focus on starving children in Africa? Do we try to focus on, poor coal miners in Appalachia, try to make their lot better? Do we focus on one particular demographic? We often hear these days about, these so-called oppressed groups. Do we try to make an oppressed group and make their lives better? Do we focus on equality for all, which is not exactly what the oppressed group people seem to be talking about? They seem to want to sort of focus on, there's this old thing from the novel Animal Farm. Most of you are probably familiar with, which is everybody is equal, but some are more equal than others, right? Are we now starting to say that, the oppressed groups are kind of more equal than others? I'm not providing an answer one way or the other. I'm not saying what we should think, but it's just a criticism of Mill, which is, how do we make these moral calculations? It seems like it's hard then, and it's harder now. Or do we focus on something else? I mean, do we focus on, helping people help themselves or something? I mean, is it more, people are helped best by, kind of a tough love sort of a thing where, they just kind of fend for themselves and hopefully their life gets better. I don't know. I have my own opinions, but I'm not interested in bringing my own politics into this or my own philosophy or religion into this, because none of those things will help. I mean, if I bring my own politics into this, then I just become a political person who's just trying to drive a particular political line. I'm not talking about ethics anymore. I'm not talking about how we can get along anymore. I'm talking about what I think we should do in this country. And really, I don't want to just address the United States, but I want to address the Western world, because I think that this moral crisis that I think exists in the Western world and has for the past century and a half is a moral crisis that that affects everybody in the West. And if as soon as I weigh in on this, I am just trying to tell you, follow my way. I don't want to do that because it wouldn't serve any purpose. It would jettison me immediately from the discussion that I want to engage with everybody, which is I want to talk to my peers on a peer-to-peer level, on an egalitarian, I'm equal to you, you're equal to me, let's talk. I don't know better than you, you don't know better than me. Let's forget about, what we think about God or what we think about politics or what we think about philosophy. And really just talk about these issues without forcing anything on anybody. I mean, we could bring all that sort of in, but, just talk to each other. And I'm less interested in what people think it means to be good, because as soon as anybody says it means to be good, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to say, okay, that's a nice idea from a distance. That's a good general idea. But it's not necessarily going to work in every situation. It's not going to solve moral dilemmas. And moral dilemmas are serious. They're not just doctored up, in some textbook somewhere. There are real moral dilemmas that we see all around us in the news all the time. If you focus on one thing, you defocus on something else, and that can change your ethical response to something. And somebody else might say, well, you're unethical for, going this way or not that way. They think you should go that way. And then the other philosopher I kind of went back to is good old Aristotle. Now, many people don't seem to think that, the ancient Greek philosophers are all that good anymore. We challenge, some people challenge whether or not we want to be thinking in terms of Western civilization or whether we want to look at other civilizations. But for what it's worth, I got my BA in Greco-Roman classics, and Aristotle thought that ethics are about balances between two different vices that are opposite each other. So the classic example is you have foolhardiness on the one hand and cowardice on the other, and in between, and the balance between the two is courage. Now, that's another approach. But again, I mean, does it really work? I don't know. I don't feel that we have a consensus in our culture. I don't know if we need a consensus, because we can't really have freedom if we, sort of force everybody to have the same ethics. We saw that in the 20th century with, communism, for example, or totalitarian communist governments that try to force everybody to believe in communism. We've seen that throughout history with religions trying to force people to believe in religion. It doesn't work. It becomes unethical because people are self-righteous. So there's this danger of being bad just because you're bad, just because you want to knock over liquor stores or something like that. Whereas there's also a danger of being bad because you're so self-righteous that you're bad. And I would like to see everybody in the West have the humility to admit that we really don't know what it means to be good. And that means that we should still try. It means that is still no excuse. It's still not something that just gets us off of work, the work of being a good person. Because we've got to go forward somehow. If we want to be good, we have to just go with our intuition or with our, whatever we glean from philosophy and religion, whatever we kind of think through this or that. And we have to really kind of, go forward with all of that. And, I think that is really the job that is before the West right now, is to come together over this in a peer-to-peer way. And the deeper problem is that whatever consensus we might once have had is less and less and less and less. And partly this is because there are problems with old ways of doing things that we now know are wrong. But partly it's also because we are so diverse. And partly because it entails, it is entailed in freedom. I mean, if we believe in having a free society and having liberties, then that ipso facto means that we're going to have a diversity of opinions about what it means to be good. So we somehow have to come together as a society without violating anybody's rights, without still allowing for people to have differences of opinion, and yet have some sort of path forward to, really go forward and be the good people that we want to be. So I am starting a new project. My project is called The Religion of Good. And my idea is that it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in God or you don't believe in God. Both of those are great. If you believe in God, wonderful. Have faith. Do what you think God wants you to do. If you're a secular humanist or something along those lines, great. You love humanity. You want to do what's best for humanity. Let's just focus on what it means to be good. You can still have your religion or your lack of religion. But the point is that in relating to other people in our society, which is really about what ethics is about anyway, I think what we need to do to go forward is to worship goodness, as it were. Worship goodness. We need to kind of take goodness as being as important to us as God, if we believe in God, or as a replacement for God if we don't believe in God, and really reach up to that goodness. Try to understand it. Try to mystically get in contact with that goodness. I personally have faith that there is such a thing as goodness. And I think it may be that humanity just isn't there yet. With all of our technology, with all of our science, with all of our advancements, we have not advanced in goodness. Or maybe we have because we're now finally starting to ask the right questions. We're now finally humbler than we used to be. Truly humble. Not the sort of, church, superiority kind of humility that churchmen and, clergy of all genders, often have, or sometimes have, in which they kind of, pound us down and kind of say, you must be humble, and which sort of seems to sort of imply that they're so much more humble than we are, which is actually a form of arrogance. I mean, a true sort of humility, a very human sort of humility that just says, we don't know and we never have, but we will want to be good. We do want to be good. And we will devote ourselves to that goodness. Because if you believe in God, that's what God wants. If you believe in humanity, that's what's best for humanity. So, you are free. I encourage you to think for yourself. I think it's the only thing to do, is to think for yourself. If you let other people think for you, there's no way I think that could be good. Most people who want you to stop thinking for yourself are bad people who want to control you. But somehow, in thinking for ourselves, if we can all come together as free thinkers, all respect each other as free, and start discussing this goodness thing, my hope and my faith is that we as the West, and that we as humanity, we as the world, can move forward and be the best people that we can be. And we'll never be perfect. We were created imperfectly. Whether we were created by God or by nature, we are imperfect creatures, and we must remember that. We must have mercy with others, and we must have mercy with ourselves because of our imperfections. So this is never going to be about purity. This is never going to be about being perfect. This is going to be, I think, about somehow muddling through being as good as we can be, and just trying our best to be good by our own lights. But our lights are important. I believe that we all have within us the ability to move forward, however muddled, to somehow move forward through that murk and mist and fog, through the mystery of goodness, to see that in some imperfect way, and to share that. And not to say, I've seen it and you haven't, and therefore I should tell you what to do, but rather just to say, I went to the top of the mountain and I saw the view. I went to this city that's hidden in a secret valley and I saw the view. I'm just reporting back what I've seen, and I can show you what I've seen, and you can show me what you've seen. So I hope that we can be good. I hope that we can move forward with this goodness project, and I hope other people will join me in this. And I wish you all a good night, and I wish goodness to all of you.